समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
You might remember that last year, I think in late March, we had done a national interest with a headline, "Thank you, Donald Trump, for putting the gun to India's head, because that's the only way we would reform in India." That is the argument I'm taking forward this week in the national interest. Meanwhile, I'm also resuming a dialogue I have with you every once in a while, which is more a reminder that journalism of this quality costs money. All of you like it, you enjoy it, you appreciate it, please pay for it. You may be living in India, you may be living in any part of the world. We have viewers, readers everywhere. We'd really appreciate if you would support our journalism, because good journalism is a larger public good. That said, let me also tell you what Trump is doing right by being so nasty to us. There is indeed one part of me that wants to say thank you, Donald Trump, for keeping the trade deal with India somewhere in your bottom drawer, if not in deep freeze. Because if you hadn't, the flurry of substantive economic reform not seen since 1991 would not have come. Think of the audacity of the new labor codes, for example. An early deal, even one in about July last year, the period US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is referring to now, between the UK 16th of June and Vietnam 2nd July, would have India smugly declare victory and sit back in comfortable cruise control. This hadn't yet been a government showing the stomach for any risky reform, and the few it tried, it retreated from without a fight. Think the new land acquisition bill that was lost to Rahul Gandhi's Sutmut ki Sarkar, farm laws that was lost to the pressure of Punjab farmers, mostly Punjab farmers. These were all withdrawn. And labor codes simply put on the back burner in subsequent risk aversion, although these had gone through the full parliamentary process, including the committees. There was some reform on economic governance, including the cleaning of PSU banks' balance sheets, serious, some reform but not risky, bank consolidation, and the bankruptcy regime. But this period also saw the return of the big state with its My Baap protection. Duties, more fashionably called as tariffs now, grew, and a new regime of quality control orders, or QCOs, came up as a humongous non-tariff protective wall. One sector of Indian industry after another lobbied and collected these QCOs. Only a deep state with the brilliance of Indian civil service could have designed these. These are probably what Trump kept referring to as India's obnoxious non-tariff barriers. Their time is over. These are now being rolled back in the kind of alacrity, if not panic, that seizes school kids if the teacher walked in after a loo break and caught them watching Netflix on their phones. A civil servant as powerful, experienced, and trusted as former Cabinet Secretary Rajiv Gauba, now positioned in Niti Aayog to drive reform, is leading this rollback project. More power to him. But again, thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you for not being less nasty. Thank you for being such an egomaniac as to blow a most consequential relationship over whether somebody called you first or not. And thank you also for continuing to speak your mind. And thank you further for having a team that speaks similarly on your behalf. Lutnick's is the latest gift. Straight talk is better than the old-fashioned diplomatic say one thing, mean another. If not for Trump, this trade-averse BJP establishment, which reads much more from its own ideological scriptures than Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, would not have rediscovered the magic of trade deals. This after it had spent nearly a decade burning up what it inherited, as also the bilateral investment treaties, BITs. Now, UK, EFTA, EFTA, or European Trade Free Trade Association already in the bag, and EU on the way, almost every member of the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which we had bucked earlier, almost all members except China signed up, and even restrictions on China being lifted, India has changed its mind on trade. Thank you, Trump, yet again. Anything less direct and offensive, anything less than Trump at his worst, and we would risk our self-congratulatory establishment going into complacent chill. 7% growth with negligible inflation combined with hard Hinduized nationalism and efficient welfare delivery makes for a killer combo electorally. So why risk rocking your own boat with reform? This government was like chasing 272. Remember, that's a number you need for the majority in Lok Sabha. So they were like chasing 272 in 5 years and batting at about 180 for one in its second year. So if you continue doing tuk-tuk, you will win the game. Until Trump started to bowl from the Pennsylvania Avenue end and reminded us that play safe was no option. Survival tough, thereby score whatever the risk. There was always expectation that Trump would use trade as an instrument of policy. But India failed to anticipate his using tariffs as his main weapon, in fact his new weapon of mass destruction or WMD. To be fair, so did the rest of the world. It's just that some of the world had leverage, like China, and also India had been the most complacent and trade averse and probably believed that the strategic interest, given the China factor, the strategic interest would drive this relationship in Trump's second term. That strategic aspect, on the contrary, turned on us as Pakistan returned to White House or to White House's favor after Operation Sindoor. Any residual goodwill between Modi and Trump vaporized in the "Where's my Nobel Prize" heat. India surely could not have recommended him for the Nobel, but saying thank you for facilitating the ceasefire by drumming sense in these stupid Pakistani heads before we broke them was worth thinking about. Counting on deeper security interests to override this was a strategic error. There is also the other side of me that acknowledges the damage this continuing crisis is doing to the millions of jobs it might potentially incinerate in low-wage mass employment sectors like fisheries, garments, hosiery, gems and jewelry making. So far, these sectors have survived with some state help and some older momentum still in continuation, some old orders. But another 3 months and you are looking at mass layoffs in these sectors. India, therefore, cannot carry on like this for too long. Solutions have to be found. That doesn't mean, however, that India plays supplicant to Trump in public as he expects from every leader except Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. But India can be more flexible in several areas sensitive for Trump. His farm lobby, for example. I know that the instinctive opposition in India comes from a fear that this would wipe out Indian agriculture or bring in a flood of GM products that India still bans, which is unwise in my long-held view, but we can leave that aside. There are ways of getting around this without being offensive or rigid or violating your own red lines. See how the US Embassy in Dhaka is celebrating the arrival of just 58,000 tons of American corn. That is chicken feed, literally. India is a net corn importer, mostly for poultry. What is the problem with importing a sizable, substantive amount of corn, if only to squeeze it for ethanol and chicken feed? Don't tell me we can't use any GM elements for our poultry. GM cotton seed husk is already integral to our cattle feeds since 2003, and oil drawn from it has been in our food chain for these 23 years. The world is finding ways of dealing with Trump. At least by now you know his method and style. You will need to give him some harmless wins without fawning publicly. There is some clamor to go and lock horns as Indira Gandhi did with Richard Nixon. If Indira could do it, so can Modi. That, however, was a different time and context. The Cold War raged and Mrs. Gandhi had the Soviet Union at the peak of its power as a treaty-bound ally. It is a different world now and a new India. You could ignore Nixon's fulminations, but not Trump's now when India is economically and strategically so integrated with the US and global systems. Meanwhile, while you wait for the moves as Sergio Gore takes office as US ambassador next week, keep pushing the hard reforms because this is once in a generation crisis. And as we sometimes do with this national interest also, there is a postscript. In fact, it's a twin postscript. This brings two stories from India-US trade negotiations folklore. The first on Rajiv Gandhi's meeting with Ronald Reagan at the Oval Office in 1987. This was reported in the papers. As Rajiv picked an almond from the bowl to munch, Ronald Reagan asked him, Prime Minister, what will it take for American almonds to be sold in India? This tells you something about the Republicans and their obsession with their farmer base. The second is a story that late Abid Hussain Saab, Commerce Secretary and later Ambassador to Washington, used to tell. Once he said he told his minister, his Commerce Minister VP Singh, Sir, let's give our country a slogan, export or perish. Do no such thing, Abid Saab, VP Singh said, or this country may just decide to collectively perish. I wrote this in a national interest while they were around and got laughs from both of them. I think this also features this conversation in a two-part walk the talk I had done with VP Singh. We've demolished many phobias in the 4 decades since. The fear of free trade should be the next.